Well, hello again, guys, from here inside St James's Park. And Eddie Howe has just said to us downstairs there now that he thought the performance was good. I didn't think it was bad, but I'll tell you what I thought was, I'm prepared to commit to a word as strong as terrible. The final ball, the final product, for all the territory Newcastle had, for all the openings, for all the positions of promise, the work themselves into. Wow, how bad was the final ball, the final execution, the final pass, the decision making in the final third. I just thought was so poor. And this comes back to a point I made after the game down at Crystal Palace recently, where ultimately some games you just revert to a level of quality, of pedigree, of the level the player is perhaps at over the course of a season, over the course of a career. You know, every player has a base level of ability, and that at times there today when Newcastle didn't have Alexander Isak at full throttle. Clearly, we'll come on to why he went off in just a second. When they didn't have Callum Wilson available at all, when they had an Anthony Gordon who looked a little jaded at times, as much as I thought he gave his absolute best, when they lacked that real game changer, that real elite player who was, fit and on form in the final third of the pitch, it showed then that is why, I think I've spoken about this in recent days. I do think they need a new right winger this summer. I think they'll go out and spend good money on a player who gives more in terms of that end product on a regular, reliable basis. I think they need another centre forward, because during what could arguably be, on reflection, one of the most important half hours of the season there today, the final half hour of the game, Newcastle didn't have a striker on the pitch. Now, why was that? That was because Alexander Isak had been brought off. It was one of the very first questions Eddie's just been asked downstairs. Of course it was, because when he did go off, he didn't necessarily look happy, I thought, when he walked off there on the touchline. He gave one of those, who me? Which everyone else in the stadium was saying, what, who you? It was, we didn't expect him to come off. Eddie's just explained Alexander Isak was feeling under the weather yesterday, and to be fair, that showed. Listen, and if that had been any other player and you'd looked at the performance solely in isolation and you'd saw Isak's number come up, you just said, well, okay, yeah, he's done nothing, he's been isolated. I think he'd had 13 touches perhaps it was to that point. So in terms of the performance, no grumbles, but because of everything Alexander Isak is and how good he has been of late, that's why it was a surprise. But Eddie said no, he made a call to protect the player going into a big week. Now, personally, I would have probably still left him on, because as much as Newcastle are going into a big week, it's even bigger on account of the fact that they didn't manage to score in the final half hour. And would Isak, even an Isak under the weather, would he have put one of them under the bar instead of like Harvey Barnes, who put it over? Anthony Gordon got in a couple of decent positions, didn't have that finish. Elliot Anderson had a shot, hit his own foot, and it spun wide. Bruno didn't really have that cutting edge in the final third. Jacob Murphy today, I like Jacob Murphy a lot, and I think he's actually in the team on merit at the moment. I think he's going through he's had a good run of form the last couple of weeks, but I thought he wasn't great there today, and it all came down to the final ball. And do you know what? They're not bad balls that they're putting in. They're not scuffing them. They're not shanking them out of play. They're just not finding the man they should really find. There's almost a percentage element. Murphy and Livramento, especially in the first half, got into a couple of good positions down the right, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, right, pick out a man. You've got one man to hit, really. He's like there, and yes, there are a lot of bodies around him, but do something inventive, do something clever. And the balls were just being floated, just being chipped into areas of promise, you would say. But you've got to be better than that. You've got to be more incisive, ruthless, be a killer in that position. And Newcastle just weren't. It got to the point where you were watching them, the final ball thing just became so frustrating. We're sat and we're talking amongst ourselves, and it's just like, final ball, final ball, final ball. And it got to the end where it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. You just knew the game. You didn't really expect them there in that final 15 minutes to get anything. There were a couple of late penalty appeals. If any of you guys watching have been following from afar, what was the take in the stadium? Well, yeah, there was a little bit of angst towards the officials. The officials were booed when they walked off at the end there. Were the penalties? No, I don't think there were. Miguel Almiron's dive that looked like a dive in real time. Why didn't he stay on his feet? Anthony Gordon, it's one of those where he's worked his body into a clever position. He's done this once or twice with Calvin Phillips at the other end of the pitch against West Ham, of course. If the referee gives it on the pitch, I've only seen one replay, I must admit, I'd like to see more. Referee gives it on the pitch, perhaps it stays as a pen, but it wasn't screaming out to me as a penalty, no. And it almost felt there towards the end as if Newcastle were going to need a little turn of fortune like that from a set piece or from a penalty to get something. Because no, I thought Yeah, to revisit what I said at the very top there about what Eddie had said, where he thought it was a good performance. Yeah, it wasn't a bad performance. They had a lot of the ball at times. Like again, you know, they got into decent enough positions, but that quality just wasn't there. And to go back to the Isak issue, this is why we've spoken so much all season about the need for another striker in there to make it 3 strikers, or to change one of them up, as in, you know, Wilson going out and somebody else coming in, because the availability of the two, they've either at the same time either both not been available or only one has been available. How many matches? You can probably count on one hand, I think, the number of times actually Isak and Wilson have been fully fit together, where you've gone into a game thinking, okay, which one of them is going to play here? There's a selection issue. It's almost as if the team has, you know, in the central striking position, it's picked itself every week. And that is not where you want to be on so many levels, in terms of that competition, bringing out the best in each other, having you know, an option to come off the bench when another one tires, protecting the other player against injury, and also at times putting 2 strikers on the pitch together. We saw how well that worked down at Burnley last week. I thought having Isak and Wilson on from the start here today, I thought that would have just inspired Newcastle, given that it's something new, it's something different, gives Isak something different to think about, Wilson something different to think about. That's not easy for me to say. The whole team, a different sort of focus. And then to turn up here, and there'd been a couple of whispers last night going into this morning that Wilson wasn't going to make it. I just think that had a little bit of a deflating effect on the team and on the team sheet as well. Now, what was the problem with Wilson? Eddie Howe had said a little bit of tightness before the game. I don't know if that's been lost in translation, because I know Wilson had been struggling with illness, so perhaps it was something similar to Isak. We need a little bit more clarity on that. It wasn't massively clear after the game whether it was muscle tightness or chest tightness. Certainly the interpretation before the game was it was a chest tightness. But anyway, you know, the language being used, it doesn't sound too serious. Wilson should come back in for Wednesday, but, you know, by then, this was an opportunity missed. Today is gone. Whatever, it's too late. Today, for me, is a huge 2 points dropped, an opportunity missed, and all of the confidence I had about Newcastle going into this game in isolation as a 90 minutes, and also the whole European picture. Well, some of that's faded today. I'll be honest. You know, us guys were just stood talking to some of the players in the mix zone there afterwards, and then you're chatting amongst yourselves, and confidence-wise with regards to Europe, and we've all got a vested selfish interest because we want to get our passports out and we want to travel doing the job, and you guys want to do that as supporters. So this is big, you know, this week is big, not just for our own selfish reasons, but also in terms of the journey of the club, in terms of returning European football, keeping Bruno Isak happy, attracting potential new signings. You cannot underestimate how huge this is on so many levels, and I just think that day there, it was really, really deflating, I thought. And to go back to the nuts and bolts, the mechanics of the game, it didn't start well. I'm going to sound like I was up at Crystal Palace here. I thought they did well for the first 90 seconds. How could they not? On the back of the atmosphere, I thought everything inside, a sunny day, black and white everywhere, last home game of the season, Saturday, 3 o'clock, had everything built towards a really convincing home win for me, especially on the back of last week as well. They had a little bit of strength on the bench. Wilson was a blow, but they also had options, you know, Joe Linton, Barnes, Trippier. You looked at the bench and you still thought, even at kickoff, you know, this would be a home victory. 90 seconds, good, don't laugh. After that, what happened? It was a strange sort of game. It didn't have the real intensity of a game of such, you know, magnitude, stakes at times. I thought they weren't great in that regard. You know, we saw the game here last season when Brighton playing out from the back was suicidal at times. Well, there was passages there where Brighton were quite easily playing through Newcastle's press. I thought that was poor. You know, the first half especially. There was a spell, 10-15 minutes leading to Brighton's goal, where they were the better team. The goal wasn't against the runner play at all. Martin Dubravka hadn't looked convincing on crosses whatsoever, as he hasn't looked convincing on a great deal for a long time now for me. Brighton take the lead, and then the one finally in first half, 4th minute first half stoppage time, the one little bit of composure, the one little bit of class in the final third. Anthony Gordon's endeavours made it happen. That cute little roll to Elliot Anderson, he's got composure, and Sean Longstaff, fair enough, you know, fair play to him, he puts himself in that position to score the goal following on from Burnley last week. But the midfield in general, did it do enough to control the game? Well, no, not for me, and that goes, you know, all over the pitch really. It was just a performance that lacked the real, I use that word, lacked the real intensity and belief and conviction and energy and just everything about that it should have been today, given how big 3 points would have been and what is the most winnable out of Newcastle's 3 remaining matches. So in summary, in terms of the game, before we go on to the merit stars, disappointing. Final ball ultimately is the final word on this. It was terrible. Come on. Now the merit stars, I didn't think there were loads of candidates and not really any obvious one. I think you can probably debate this, and I'm going to go 3-2, and you probably think he's one of my favourites. But Elliot Anderson, he created the goal with, as I've just touched on there, that one real moment of class and composure Newcastle actually had in the final third. So Elliot Anderson gets the 3. Apart from that, I thought he had lots of little double touches, worked himself into those positions of threat, of promise. Could he have done more at times with that final ball? Well, yeah, but he wasn't alone in that regard. But I thought Elliot Anderson had a good game, and as I spoke about this the other day, didn't I? You know, he's just finishing the season now. I really hope he has an injury-free end of the season and a good summer, because I think so much of him, and there were glimpses of that there today, even though he clearly does need a better run of games and, you know, a more sustained run of form and fitness before we are ultimately convinced of him being, you know, that top player that we hope and think that he can be. 2 stars. Now, a debate of this between the 2 guys who are going to get the remaining merit marks. I'm probably going to go just about Anthony Gordon, because even though a lot of what he did today was frustrating at times, and I know he's got better, we all know he's got more, just coming to this game named Newcastle's Player of the Season, I still think he gave it his absolute lot, and if anything was going to come from anyone, it probably was going to be Gordon. And he created a great chance there for Harvey Barnes, I think it was. At the end there, Barnes puts it over the bar, and he was the one who was evidenced by the first goal as well. You know, he dragged Newcastle to that equaliser, even though in the build-up to it, it looked like everything else which had gone before and went after that overplaying, that indecisiveness. You know, it looked as if it was that, but then he just produces the clever little ball to Elliot Anderson, and it opens Brighton up. So Anthony Gordon gets the 2 stars, and the 1 star, well, that goes to Lewis Hall, who's probably unlucky not to get 2. I thought that was one of his better games today. And when Kieran Trippier came on, I actually thought it was going to be Tino Livramento who went off and Hall stayed on, because I don't think he was involved a lot, Livramento, but actually Brighton had quite a bit of joy defensively down his side. He didn't look right, didn't look at his usual level. But Lewis Hall Lewis Hall on the other side, I thought he did okay today. I think he is, again, you know, I touch on the Elliot Anderson. I hope that Hall has a strong end of the season, an injury-free summer, and he comes back next year is the player we've seen more of recently, those little glimpses, because there is quality in there, there is pedigree. Just to touch on that couple of little performances as well, and a lot of noise, a lot of coverage this week around Bruno Isak and Alexander Isak. I've already spoken about Isak, how disappointing he was, but Bruno as well, you know, while he gives everything, he didn't have a bad game today, but if you're the £100 million difference maker who was wanted by X, Y and Z and the big release clause, sometimes there, you know, that is where you need that inspiration, where we'll all, you know, one of the greatest performances at St James's Park this season was the opposition player Kevin De Bruyne when he came on in the Man City game, and just through sheer skill, will, a force of nature type class and quality, De Bruyne came on and turned it into a defeat into a victory for Manchester City that day. And that is when you look into the likes of Bruno there for that inspiration, just to do something for your team, to inspire, that word inspire, what would have been such a huge victory. So while I'm not criticising Bruno, I do just want to make the point that those are the players you're looking to, and they didn't really show there for me today when the team needed them most. So yeah, disappointing afternoon, guys, and I'll just give you a little scan of this place as I finish off, because it was, you know, it's the last time this season, and you've got to say that going into the final week now, the fact that it still is in Newcastle's hand, win the next 2, and they'll be playing European football next year. There was a point this season when you didn't think to have that level of fate and, you know, destiny in their own hands, you would have said that was unlikely. But they've got themselves there. Are they capable of going to Man United and Brentford and getting 2 good results? Absolutely. You know what I think of them. You know what I think of the manager. But that there today has just planted a little seed of doubt, not just because of the result, although elements of the performance weren't a little bit worrying, a little bit concerning as well. But anyway, I'll be down at Manchester United. Before that, I'll be speaking to Eddie Howe from the training ground on Tuesday. So I'll be back then, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. And just one last little scan of this place, because we won't see it again until next season. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.